I thought coming from software sales, 10 years of software sales, selling at like a big deals, complex, competitive, thinking big ticket item, thinking like I'm the best microgreen salesman there's ever been. Went in like got a 2-car garage and just started growing tons of microgreens.
Oh, nice. Just with some lights.
Towers.
Yeah, some towers. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I couldn't win the account. And so I went into farmers markets. Everyone's like, hey, we love these fresh microgreens. How do we get these back in? We're tourists from Florida, Texas. How do we get them back at home? Like, you got to find fresh there. I was like, okay, well, maybe if I dry them, then I can, and then started the first dried microgreens business.
Yeah, and then you started shipping. Mm-hmm. Interesting, yeah. So, yeah, well, what can you say about, I had a hemp-based CBD business I started in. Well, the origins were 2016. We officially launched some direct-to-consumer products back in 2017. And that was, I didn't have much of a background in sales or marketing. I had a technical background, as I described. So I went through some of that. Trying to get, that was the initial dream was like, we'll get our products on the shelves at, Whole Foods, Natural Grocer.
What was the product?
We had different types of CBD. We had tinctures, and we tried a lot of different things: topicals, capsules, lip balms.
So 2017, that's right after was it called the Farm Bill?
Yeah.
When it all in 2016, it kind of became legal again.
Yeah, I think the first Farm Bill. So a Farm Bill is a general descriptor of this large agricultural bill that Congress is supposed to pass every, 4 or 5 years. So the initial one that re-legalized hemp cultivation in the United States was in, 2014, late 2014. So the first hemp cultivations, legally licensed for outdoor cultivation were issued in, I believe, 2015. So that was definitely, Before that, it had been the last, legal hemp harvests were towards the end of World War II, the 1940s. There was a long gap there. Of course, there was a lot of, there's plenty of cannabis cultivation, but there was a long gap in, field commodity style hemp cultivation. So we were right there. I saw some of the first operations planting seeds back in 2015 when I was still finishing up my PhD, and eventually, and just decided it seemed like a great opportunity. So
this podcast is brought to you by B Micro, organic freeze-dried microgreens for easy, natural nutrition. Sprinkle them on any meal and enjoy the benefits. Shop now at bmicro.farm and use code STEVE15 to save.
Yeah, there was a real boom and bust with that industry.
Yep.
Yeah, at that moment, it was like, I wonder what it was going for. How did they measure it? By the pound of, anyhow, I knew
the
that.
Biomass, yeah.
Okay, so maybe it was like $1,000 a pound at one point, and then it went down to, the market flooded and it went down to like $200 a pound. So.
Yeah, less than that now. Yeah, I don't know what the absolute high watermark was, but it was in the hundreds of dollars per pound of dried hemp biomass flour that you would use to extract CBD from. And
was freeze drying a part of any of that process?
Well, so not initially. We did some freeze drying, not with the raw plant material, but after a little bit of separation of the trichomes from the flower material, you can freeze dry that. So that never became a big part of our processing. But the choke point is going from, you have acreage of hundreds or thousands of plants, and each one is composed of, there's fibery stems, there's leaves, there's flowers, there might be seeds mixed in there. And so if you're going for CBD cannabidiol extract, you have to extract that from these different parts of the plant. The thing is, the different parts of the plant contain different levels of CBD. Some, the stalks and the fibers and the roots, it's effectively zero. The leaves can be, upwards of maybe like 1 or 2% by dry weight. And then flowers can be anywhere from 1 to 2% all the way up to like 25% dry weight. So you have to go from, a large plant in mass and be able to separate the different parts. And there just wasn't really a lot of equipment for that at the time in 2016, 2017, even up through, now there's some equipment that's been developed. But at first, nobody knew what to do. And the prices were so high, so people would plant stuff and they didn't have contracts to sell it. And then they would get towards the end of the growing season and the plant is frost intolerant. So we get these hard frosts in the Front Range sometime around late September, early October. And if you don't have your hemp plants, inside and protected and harvest, it can be a total loss. So people would get towards the end of the season and be like, oh, what do we do? It was a complete gold rush in some ways, not really thinking things through for a lot of cultivators.
And then you'd have to test the hemp plants for THC because there was a almost arbitrary limit of, I believe, 0.03%. And if it goes over that, they call it going hot. And then you basically have to burn your crop.
Yeah. It sounds like you've had some experience or read up on it. But that's the legal distinction in the United States and most countries now is the level of THC. So if it's above 0.3% dry weight THC, statutorily in the US, that's called marijuana. If it's below 0.3, it's called hemp. So, the plants, there are many different varieties within the species cannabis, and there's a lot of overlap. If you can't tell them apart by sight, there are some, plants that will be legally below that 0.3% level of THC, but they'll look pretty similar to a marijuana plant. So you do have to test it. That leads to a lot of risk on the cultivator side as well, since the tests don't really tell you whether it's hot or not until the end of the season. So yet another risk and gamble you have to take in agriculture. But
what was your inspiration to get into that field?
well, I was I started in grad school. I mean, I was studying, I generally targeted in grad school. My main interest was a little bit outside of plants. I was mostly interested in DNA sequencing technology. And at first I was applying it to bacteria and fungi that lived like in your gut, sometimes called the microbiome collectively, or also in soils. So soils have assemblage of millions of different species of bacteria and fungi. So I was using DNA sequencing technology to identify and study the types of microorganisms that lived in your skin, your gut, and the soil. And I eventually realized that I just wanted to get more into plants. I started doing plants. So plants have their microbiome as well. I mean, their roots are integrated with the soil, and they're interacting with the soil in a very directed way. They release, famously, they take up water from the soil. Everybody knows about that. And of course, also nutrients, which are mainly, metal ions. But, plants also release carbon. They essentially take some of the energy that they harvest from the sun and the atmosphere, and they actually put that into the soil in order to encourage microbial activity. So there's this very complex symbiosis between plants and microbes and the soil. I realized that field is really, I would say, decades away from having enough basic science understanding to really be able to develop applications for agriculture and health. And I mean, there are, of course, people and companies developing applications based on microbiome. But my sense was now is a better time, given the types of DNA sequencing technology that are available, to work on the primary genome inside of the plant, all the genes that the plant has. So I made a switch, and it happened to be 2014, and cannabis was that farm bill that we talked about had just, passed, and there was a lot of excitement about, being able to study a plant that everybody knew about with a sort of, cultural, I guess if we could call it baggage or charisma that the plant has. It's, some people love it, some people hate it. But at the university, we just, my PhD advisor and our lab and myself were just, we were just over the moon having the opportunity to kind of dig into a plant species that's so woven into human history, but yet we really don't know that much about. So it was really, chasing that mystery and excitement, I think, during grad school.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in here and give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's podcast, Be Micro, the easiest way to sneak vegetables into any meal. Due to soil depletion, GMOs, and monocropping, Americans are not getting enough nutrients. So in 2018, I founded Be Micro, the first freeze-dried microgreens company in the US to help Americans get more concentrated natural nutrients into their diet. Microgreens are a phase in the plant's life when they're 14 days old and naturally the most concentrated in vitamins, minerals, nutrients, all the good things that we need. Our microgreens are grown here in the US in soil and greenhouse. They're certified USDA organic and regenerative organic. We grow, wash, and freeze dry them to extend their 1-week shelf life to over 1 year, allowing us to ship anywhere in the US without the worry of spoilage. We have 2 flavors, broccoli, backed by over 2,000 studies on sulforaphane and its powerful detox benefits, and a blend of red cabbage, radish, and broccoli, the most potent detox formula we've tested, offering you the most bang for your buck. Easily sneak these microgreens in any meal. Eggs, smoothies, pizza, pasta, even your kids' mac and cheese, you can't even taste it. Use code STEVE15 to save at bmicro.farm.